Hi, I'm Craig Wilson, and I'm here at Colonial Michilimackinac in Mackinac City. Now, when you come to visit Michilimackinac in the summertime, one of the first people that you'll meet as you approach the fort is one of our interpreters dressed as a French Canadian Voyageur, or canoe man. Now, those voyageurs wore some pretty unique clothing, so today I'd like to walk through what they were wearing and why. So one of the most common questions that people ask our voyageur interpreters is, where are your pants? But as you can see, I'm not wearing pants. Instead, I have on a breechcloth. This is something that the French Canadian Voyageurs adopted from the native people that they encountered out here in the Great Lakes. And a breechcloth is merely a long strip of fabric. It's maybe a yard long, you can see it's about a foot wide, and you hook it over a piece of leather or other fabric that you have tied around your waist. It's very comfortable, it's very practical, especially when you consider that these voyageurs are going to be jumping in and out of the water all of the time. It's going to make sure that what you're wearing doesn't actually get wet. Now, it is April, so it is very cold, so I'm going to quickly move on to our next layer, which is a simple linen shirt. So this is the basic undergarment for essentially everyone here at Michilimackinac in the 18th century, both men and women, French, British, and native people. And as you can see, it's quite long. When I have this on, you can't even tell that I am wearing that breechcloth underneath it. These voyageurs might actually be issued a shirt or maybe several shirts as part of their payment when they signed on for a summer's worth of work paddling those canoes. So I'm just hooking the cuffs closed. I've got some small cuff buttons. Those hold the cuffs closed at my wrists. And now, as I mentioned, these voyageurs jump in and out of the water all the time. Whenever the canoe approaches shore, whenever they need to unload the canoe in portage or carry everything around a set of rapids or a waterfall or something like that, they're going to be in and out of the water. Now, as we discussed with that breechcloth, they're not going to want to be wearing traditional European-style breeches and stockings. Instead, they're going to look for something that comes on and off much more easily. So as those canoemen jump in and out of the water, they need something that they can take on and off their lower legs very quickly. And I have here just a set of simple wool leggings. This is something else that these voyageurs saw the native people wearing, realized how useful it was, how practical it was, and so they adopted it for themselves. So I'm just going to pull these on. You can see it's got a long string on it there. That's going to attach to that same piece of fabric that's holding up my breechcloth. And again, let's say I were in a canoe and paddling, and there's a set of rapids up ahead. So we need to run the canoe ashore, unload it, carry all the cargo, carry the canoe around those rapids. I might take these off before I jumped in the water. So I would just be jumping in bare-legged. You keep these leggings dry, do whatever you need to do in the water, and then when it's time to get back in the canoe, perhaps on the other side of those rapids, you can step back into your wool leggings, which are going to be nice and dry. They will dry your lower legs off and keep you warm. So with those leggings on, just to make sure that they stay where they're supposed to be, I can also add some pretty simple garters just underneath my knee. These could be pretty elaborately woven, they could have beadwork on them, but for me today I've just got, again, some plain strips of cloth, or what we would call wool today. Something else that voyageurs would occasionally have, again, another thing that they copied from the native people, are tattoos. Native people would be tattooing themselves for a variety of reasons, and some of the voyageurs, especially the ones who went to the west and north of Lake Superior and actually spent the winter out in Native American communities, may have also tattooed themselves or had themselves tattooed as a mark of their professionalism, as a mark that they had actually wintered beyond the boundaries of European civilization. So a tattoo like this would be used with perhaps ash, or more likely ink, a needle, or perhaps a very sharp gar tooth, which is a fish's tooth, and it's a stick and poke tattoo. So we have the basics down. I've got my shirt, my leggings, my breechcloth, and again, these are all things that the voyageur may have been issued as part of his payment. When those men signed their contracts with a merchant in Montreal in the springtime, they would be allotted some money, they would be paid a wage, they would be promised a specific amount of food, and they may also have been issued clothing, perhaps a shirt or a set of leggings or a breechcloth. Now moving on, in terms of neckwear, I have a very practical piece of neckwear. It's just called a roller. It's just a long piece of linen. And this is going to go around my neck. It's kind of like an elongated handkerchief. These could also be made out of printed, colorful materials. Cotton is becoming more popular for things like this in the 18th century, but again, linen remains very, very popular. It's nice and absorbent, it's pretty easy to wash, and so this goes around my neck, a little bit like a tie. And you can just knot it in the front. And again, this too is a very practical piece of clothing. If your brow is sweaty, you can pretty easily wipe your brow with it. It kind of keeps sweat from rolling down onto your shirt, so you may not need to launder your shirt as often. It also gives you a little bit of a nicer silhouette, makes you look a little bit more dressed up. So as we discussed before, instead of traditional breeches, I have a breechcloth on. But without breeches, there's also a pretty important piece of clothing that I am missing. And that's a pocket. I don't necessarily have places to store things on my person right now. And so something that voyageurs and other people may have been doing is wearing a woven sash just around their waist. And a little bit later on in the 18th century, these could become very, very elaborately woven with lots of different colors. But in the 1770s, the time period that we're talking about here at Michilimackinac, they were still pretty plain. It's very much a functional garment, because now I've essentially given myself a utility belt. I can stick things in there, I can hang things off it. For instance, I've got a slit pouch here. This is just a pretty simple piece of leather sewn back on itself. I can hook that over that sash, and now I have a very convenient place to store any number of things, perhaps a pipe, perhaps some tobacco. They may also have had separate tobacco pouches that they wore. You could hang a cup off of this if you wanted to take a drink while you're in the canoe. But again, it gives you a place to essentially store things in lieu of pockets. Now, since it is a little bit colder today, I'm going to add a sleeved waistcoat, or something that will look pretty similar to a jacket to us today. So again, this is what you might call a sleeved waistcoat. Again, it's just a small, short jacket. You can layer this on top. You'll note that the shirt does come well below the bottom of the jacket. We see that in period images. But again, just another layer, helps keep me a little bit warmer. This is very much in the style of a working person's garment. We see sailors, voyageurs, farmer, tradesmen wearing these type of jackets, so they are quite common. So with that jacket on, I'm just about ready to go outside, but you may notice I am still barefoot, and indeed, when these canoemen are jumping in and out of their canoes, they may have been barefoot, but if you've been out in the water here in the Great Lakes, you know that it's not always a nice sandy bottom, so they would be wearing something on their feet. They may have been wearing soft leather moccasins, again, something that they copied from the native people, but they may also have been using a bit of a European adaptation of that moccasin style, basically a boat shoe, something called a soleil de boeuf. These are made from a very thick part of a cow hide, boeuf meaning beef, and they're essentially deck shoes. They're easy to slip on and off of your feet. That thick leather will protect the bottoms of your feet from stones and sharp sticks, things like that. But again, when you're jumping in and out of the canoe, these are easy to take on and off as needed. So we're just about ready to head out, but we are missing our headgear. Now another very, very common piece of Voyageur clothing is a knit cap. It's something that they may have called a toque. Some people still call these toques today. They're almost universally red. They are double-sided, so it's essentially a large collapsed football of knit material. And this is a great all-seasons garment. Keeps your head warm, kind of keeps it insulated. You can wear it up on top of your head, kind of flopped over like that. You can pull it down over your ears as needed. But again, this is something that's incredibly common. People talk about the Voyageurs, these French Canadian canoemen, wearing knit caps like this essentially all the time. There are other options for headgear. Voyageurs did like to show off occasionally, so they might have a round hat, something like this. This would be cut down from an old hat. The leaves would be folded down, reshaped. They may have added some tape or even a feather to it to just give themselves an air of dignity, and it's a way to show off when they got to someplace like Michilimackinac. Now before we head outside, since it is still quite cold here, there's just one more garment that those French Canadian Voyageurs and essentially everyone else here at Michilimackinac would likely have been wearing in the wintertime, and that's a capote. So this is a type of overcoat. There are a few different styles of these. This one, as you can see, has ties down the front. You could tie it up. There is a very nice hood on top as well, keep the snow, the rain, the wind, and the cold away from your head. But with this, you could go outside and be relatively comfortable. Having worn this stuff outside in the wintertime myself, I can tell you that it does in fact keep you warm. Well, that's just a brief look at what these French Canadian Voyageurs would be wearing. Again, it's a pretty unique set of clothing. You don't see many people running around here at Michilimackinac, either in the 18th century or today, without pants on, but those Voyageurs definitely did. But again, that clothing reflects the reality of their work. They are people who work on the water. They need to be in and out of that water all the time. They're in pretty much constant contact with native people, and so they look at what those native people were wearing, they saw what worked for them, and they adapted it into their own work clothing. Now again, when you come visit us here at Michilimackinac in the summer, do be sure to stop at our Voyageur landing, talk to the historic interpreter there, ask them about their clothing, they'll be happy to tell you about it, and then come on inside and see everything else that we do have to offer here. If you'd like more information about Michilimackinac or any of Mackinac State Historic Park sites, you can visit our website, MackinacParks.com, and we do hope to see you here at Colonial Michilimackinac later this summer.